You are listening to So What, a podcast from Canadian Mennonite University. CMU is in Treaty 1 territory, Winnipeg, Manitoba. I'm your host, Jonas Cornelson, and I'm in Treaty 7, Calgary, Alberta. This is the final episode in our series on Naawi-Oodena, the First Nations-led redevelopment of a former army barracks in southwest Winnipeg into a mixed-use urban reserve. We've covered lots of ground, negotiations over the ownership of the land, and the coming together of two partners, Treaty 1 Nation and Canada Lands Company, to plan and develop the site in a way that showcases Indigenous history, culture, and design. Today we're going to hear a little more about the plan itself, and how the leaders of Treaty 1 hope the area will become a vibrant piece of Winnipeg's urban fabric. And it's just down the road from CMU. We'll start with how the new development will blend with the areas that already surround it. Then we'll talk about the mix of uses planned for the site and how that might feel at street level. Finally, we'll turn back to the theme of neighbors that we started this whole series with, and hear a bit of what Treaty 1 Nation leaders hope for from the surrounding communities. All the quotes you'll hear come from a September 2022 town hall event on the future plans for Naawi-Oodena, hosted at CMU by Treaty 1 Nation and their development company. Let's get into it.
So we're really looking for seamless integration. So we don't want somebody to look across the street and be like, oh, there's a completely different community. In the way that it wouldn't fit in.
That was the voice of Jolene Mercer, Director of Governance for Treaty 1 Nation, talking about the way the edges of Naawi-Oodena, where it borders existing neighborhoods, are being planned. In the intro, I mentioned urban fabric. Let's make the metaphor ridiculous for a second. If Winnipeg was a pair of jeans, the Naawi-Oodena land is a big hole near about the left knee. On Google Maps, it's just an empty gray space. Now, if I was good at sewing and wanted to patch that hole without drawing extra attention to it, I'd use a color of thread that didn't make it obvious where the original jeans ended and the patch began. If the transition really is seamless, as Jolene said, I guess there wouldn't be thread at all. Okay, enough with the jeans metaphor. Here's Dave Thomas, a longtime architect, now planning and design manager for Treaty 1 Nation, describing how those principles will be put into practice.
Along the perimeter on the west side, we have some kind of smaller housing units, and those are to blend in with the community. Some of the smaller units on this side here to the west of the site. So that is a transition, not like a stark kind of, you come from the existing community into the new community, and we want it to be seamless. We want it to blend together.
Do you remember a couple episodes ago when I mentioned Swindon Way? There was a group of residents who were somewhat concerned that their low-rise townhouse complexes would be dwarfed by some massive development right across the way at Naawi-Oodena. According to Dave Thomas here, that simply isn't going to happen. But even with these smooth transitions, as Jolene Mercer tells it, there will be some ways that you can tell the difference when you enter Naawi-Oodena.
However, you will know that it is a completely different community because we have design standards. So everything that's built there has to conform to the design standards that we have. We're also looking at other environmentally sustainable things that we can do, and we have a really great opportunity now.
Just to remind you, 68% of Naawi-Oodena is First Nations reserve land, not municipal land. So Treaty 1 Nation can use some different design and construction standards than the city of Winnipeg. One of these new standards might even make other Winnipeggers jealous.
New technologies, even in terms of the materials that we're looking at for building our roads. So all through our negotiations with the city of Winnipeg, we kept saying, well, our standards will be at par or better. For instance, our roads will always be better than yours.
Oh, the applause. Winnipeggers love to drive almost as much as they hate their roads. We'll get back to roads in a few minutes. Jolene was saying that much as Naawi-Oodena will blend in with the nearby areas, there will also be ways it stands out, especially with these new design practices. And as Chief Gordon Blue Sky from Broken Head First Nation put it, there are other ways in which the area really should stand out.
When we talk about seamless from one neighborhood to the next, I don't believe that seamless should exclude my cultural, shouldn't exclude what makes us as Indigenous people. The names of the sites, those are things that should be embraced and shouldn't be fought. Those are things that I feel is what this city needs. It needs to be colorful. 60 years ago, it wasn't so colorful. 50 years ago, it wasn't so colorful. And I think our language is beautiful. I think my people are beautiful.
I love the way Chief Blue Sky put it there. It's a good reminder that seamless doesn't mean sameness in how the area looks and feels. While Naawi-Oodena will integrate with the surrounding areas, its overall urban design certainly doesn't replicate these older neighborhoods. Let's take a look now at some of the different land uses planned for the new development.
So along the west side, we got smaller residential, and then as it moves east, we've got some buildings that become larger, and we've got commercial space along Keniston. I think when we were working with the planner, one of the discussions we had was some of the energy that's happening in the strip mall by Superstore, it just continues through the site, and kind of we activate it in a certain way that it becomes more friendly to the neighborhood with walking and that. So
that's planning and design manager Dave Thomas again on how the mix of residential and commercial buildings changes throughout the site. In the master planning document, the design of Naawi-Oodena is captured by phrases like mixed use and complete community. Mixed use is exactly what it sounds like. Residential, commercial, and recreational areas are integrated in the same blocks and even the same buildings instead of separated. Complete community is sort of an aspirational term. People in such an area can meet most of their daily needs on foot or bicycle if they so choose. For some, this would even include their workplace. Overall, the master plan indicates up to 3,000 residential units and 1.2 million square feet of commercial space when Naawi-Oodena is finished. I could go on about this, but suffice it to say the vast majority of Winnipeg isn't built this way. Naawi-Oodena aims to change this, particularly in the sections that parallel existing major roads, Grant Avenue running east-west and Keniston Boulevard north to south. Let's look at Keniston Boulevard. Dave already mentioned it back there. It's also known as Route 90, and for years there have been calls to widen the road for vehicle traffic in the area. According to Tim Daniels, Chief Development Officer of Treaty 1 Development Corporation, the Naawi-Oodena plan allows for that widening, as well as the development of primarily commercial mixed-use spaces in that corridor.
So, we all know it's a premium location right on Route 90. And just to let you know, in the get-go, the big question is, are you going to allow for the widening of Keniston? And we are. This never been widened because the land ownership was been in dispute all these years. So now that the city knows who the owners are, that will be widened in the future. We want people to stop in our future businesses, but we want people to travel through to get to their homes and other sites across Winnipeg. Real cool. So I look forward to that as myself.
A few minutes ago, I talked about Winnipeg's love-hate with roads. I told you we'd get back to roads. And this part is truly funny, because as I was listening to the event, I really wanted to ask Tim if expanding Keniston would benefit other modes of transportation beyond cars. In case my biases haven't already been blasting out your speakers, I'm all about walking, biking, and public transit. Then lo and behold, in the final minutes of the Q&A session, I heard a familiar voice on what her son might say had he been there.
As you talk about widening Keniston, and I heard us all get very excited about that for cars, he would wonder, and so I'm asking on his behalf, how can you folks, in terms of your development, put some pressure on Winnipeg to remember how to include bike kind of accessibility in that very great corridor that people could start using and feel really excited about. So just asking on his behalf.
Yes, that just happened to be my mom, Dory. And I was touched that she got up and spoke on my behalf, if not slightly embarrassed that I had basically demonized the entire audience for their love of roads without even being there. For my part, having been called out, I'll say this. Whether Kenaston ends up being 2 lanes or 3 in each direction, I'm encouraged by the overall design principles in the Naawi-Oodena master plan. The sections right along Kenaston are designated commercial mixed use, meaning everything that fronts onto Kenaston will be commercial, but residential units are possible above and behind those buildings. The master plan also indicates that all these developments should be accessible by foot, bike, and transit, with car parking designed to minimize traffic and visual impact. And hey, if there's big construction happening on Kenaston anyway, throwing in separated bicycle paths would be a major step toward connecting existing, relatively new bike routes along the same corridor to the south and north. From IKEA to the Assiniboine River and on to Polo Park Mall, all on separated bike paths. A guy can dream, right? Also, Kenaston Boulevard is not the whole story of Naawi-Oodena. I'm even more excited about the section of the property along Grant Avenue, which runs east-west and reaches CMU just a couple kilometers down the road. This is planned as a mixed-use village, with residential buildings up to 6 stories, integrated with retail, restaurants, patios, and generous sidewalks at street level on both sides. There's language in the master plan like, quote, active uses at grade to create a pedestrian-friendly, transit-supportive urban environment along Grant Avenue. It's hard to explain just how excited I get about this, especially because it sounds like planning mumbo-jumbo, but behind the mumbo-jumbo is a vision of urban life that has long been missing from Winnipeg. Somewhere made to walk, bus, and bike between sidewalk-adjacent storefronts instead of plodding through massive surface-level parking lots. Here's a bit more from planner Dave Thomas, in response to my mom's question, or my question through my mom that we heard before, on where the planning and design team had to look for examples of how to build this kind of area well.
We've been doing some research on walkable areas, like walkable shopping areas. So we found some sites in Scottsdale, Arizona, in Surrey, in Vancouver, and we're just like developing looking at some of these, the qualities of some of these spaces. It just makes sense if there's a sidewalk, you want to have bikes separate. We're looking around the world at different examples. Because when I talk to the city and I talk to different advocates for bike paths, I talk to them and I say, where in Winnipeg are good examples? And they said, there's none in Winnipeg. You have to look in Europe and around the world. So we're looking at those. So,
if you've been to downtown Winnipeg, you know that frequent parking lots do not add to the vibrancy of an urban space. Naawi-Oodena's mixed-use village could well be a test case for how the rest of Winnipeg reimagines itself as the city grows and changes. I laughed when Dave said that there are no good examples of this kind of walkable area in Winnipeg. But I would add there aren't any yet. All in all, while there may be more lanes for cars on Kenaston, we will also see a lot more activity at street level in Naawi-Oodena. I think my experience living on campus at CMU would have been greatly enhanced by having a mixed-use village down the road instead of empty lots beside roaring car traffic. We've heard lots here about what Naawi-Oodena will look like from a design perspective. At the same time, we've barely scratched the surface. The master plan is a 56-page document, and it's available at treaty1.ca if you want to go for a truly deep dive. Despite what you may think about planning documents, it's a good read. Just before we go, I want to share a couple of thoughts from the Treaty 1 leadership on what they hope for from their neighbors when Naawi-Oodena is built. With lots of students living on campus, and many more students, faculty, and staff commuting through the area daily, CMU is in a great position to interact with what's going on at Naawi-Oodena.
I just got one point. There's, especially in terms of institutions like this, is, take the opportunity to learn.
That's Chief Gordon Bluesky answering a question from a CMU staff member on what the folks at Naawi-Oodena would like to see from their neighbors. While he was addressing CMU, of course, I'll also note that there are 2 high schools just east of CMU on Grant Avenue. Great opportunities there, too. Now, here's Jolene Mercer again, Director of Governance at Treaty One Nation, with a little more on why these learning opportunities are important and what some of them may be.
What I think universities can do and should do is exactly what was already said, is that teaching and that sharing and that learning. I think that there are all kinds of things that happen with First Nations people that mainstream populations just don't understand and they don't know about. They've never learned about it. You know, we are really trying to make it open and welcome to everybody to come and learn. And we have a plan for a number of museums there, so that, you know, could become part of the curriculum. Is we will be opening a Treaty One museum that, you know, focuses on the history of Treaty One and our 7 communities and how they came to be and all about them. But also, you know, an art gallery that's showcasing the art that we have and the artists that we have. And
it sounds really good, but lest you think it's all museums and art galleries, here's Jolene one more time with an appeal for another kind of exchange.
But the other thing we want the university to do is for sure encourage your students, come spend money over here. That's really what we want, is everybody to come and spend their money with us. And that's why the research that was done is so important, to ensure that the services and the things that we're providing there are not you know, already being provided, or they're being provided by us in a different way that's, you know, a gap maybe in services or retail that's in the area.
Although the sales pitch got a laugh from the audience, the business potential of Naawi-Oodena really is a major part of what's going on. A couple episodes ago, we talked about the way urban reserves allow First Nations access to much greater economic opportunity than reserves in remote rural areas. And that's great news. From all I've learned about here, it sounds like Treaty One Nation and their development company have really done their homework in terms of providing the right services in a great urban setting. So, yeah, go and spend your money there. Support the businesses and cultural institutions at Naawi-Oodena. When construction is finished, of course. It'll be a while. But I, for one, can't wait to be parted with a few of my dollars when I visit Winnipeg and Naawi-Oodena in the years to come. Hey, if there's enough bike lanes, maybe I'll even move back there. Should I say that out loud? Is that a commitment? I don't know. Well, that's a wrap on this episode, on our Naawi-Oodena series, and on Season 3 of the podcast. If you're listening for the first time, or you have been for a long time, thanks for tuning in. It's always fun digging into what's happening at CMU and why it matters beyond campus. If you want to get in touch or leave a comment on what you've heard, check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/sowhatpodcast. My name is Jonas Cornelson, and I hope to chat with you again. Take care.